So that was QoS and policy mapping. Now let's jump to the last tab, which is Advanced tab. And because this is a CCNA course, the good news is that there are many things here that you don't care about because they are advanced. But there are a few things that you may want to be aware of, for your awareness and maybe also a little bit for the CCNA exam. So one item that I want to attract your attention to is this one, allow AAA override. If you check that box, what you do is that you allow a Radius server to, of course, not only say if you're okay to access the network or not, but also return a specific profile for you. I don't know if you remember, but when we're looking at ICE, we saw that you could, for each authorization profile, define a lot of things. Bandwidth, VLAN, and many other things. Access control list as well. So if you define those on ICE, the ICE is going to return this profile along with the access accept message to the controller. But until you check that box, the controller is only going to look at the access accept, and the other values are going to be ignored because the controller is going to say, I have already values in my SSID for that access. So I have VLANs, I have everything. But if you check that box, allow AAA override, what you say is that you allow the controller to take into account for individual clients the profile is being returned. So if the controller says VLAN association to the SSID is VLAN 23, but the Radius says for that user it's VLAN 25, by checking that box, you allow the controller to put that client in VLAN 25 instead of the default VLAN 23. So whenever you have some Radius profiling, you want to check that box to allow the controller to get those values and accept them. The other one is client exclusion, and you see by default it's enabled, and the value before I unchecked it was 60 seconds. So what this one does is, when you try to enter credentials and you enter them wrong a certain number of times, 3 to 5 depending on the security mechanism you're using, your client is going to be banned, excluded for 60 seconds by default. So that's a good thing, because if you're trying to run a brute force attack against a user, you will not be able to run more than 3 or 5 attempts every minute. So doing the entire dictionary is going to take you 15 million years. This is good, and this is a good value, 60 seconds, because 60 seconds is short enough that if somebody is trying to enter some credentials and they make a mistake, they will be banned for 60 seconds, and that's enough for them to find the right values and retry again and be successful. If you disable that feature, you may open your door to some brute force attacks, and then you make your network weaker. If you extend that value longer, you may be too long, and then users making a mistake, maybe finding the right password, and may still be excluded by the time they find the right value, and that's where you get support call. So we say typically client exclusion is good for security, and 60 seconds is good for security as well, because it's short enough for users and long enough for hackers. If your client is being excluded, I did one here where I entered the wrong password on this SSID a few times, it's going to end up in this excluded client list. And you see here, I have my client, you see the MAC address. I tried to get onto test 2. I got an 8.1x failure because I entered the password 5 times wrong, so I am in the excluded list. So what you can do once you see a client here, if your delay is too long, is to go at the end and remove the client from the list. But 60 seconds typically is enough. It's going to get out of the list by itself by the time this timer expires. So it's nice to have. The only reason why you may want to uncheck it is if you are experimenting in your lab and you are going to be excluded all the time because you are going to fail the authentication a few times because you're working on learning things. So you may want to temporarily disable that so that it doesn't slow you down as you work, right? But in your real network, once the network is configured properly and you know it's working, it's probably something that you want to have back and have to its default value. Another area that I would like to attract your attention to is this Flex Connect area. We'll spend the entire next module on this one. But I want to show it to you because when we'll get to Converged Access, you'll see that in the SSID we don't have that section because Flex Connects are not supported on Converged Access. So it's advanced, but Flex is something you need to know for CCNA, so we'll come back on that tab in next module. Next one is DHCP address assignment. If you check that box, what it does is that it forces the client to have the first packet exchange after authentication to be a DHCP request. In other words, you force your client to use DHCP and renew their IP address when they move to that SSID. That is disabling static IP addresses. Not a big deal, but it's so common to see people check it because they want to force some kind of renewal of the IP address, and then they have some clients that use static IP address that cannot join the SSID. So be careful, that forces your client to always use DHCP renew their IP when they join, they cannot use static IP addressing. All right, there are many other options in this advanced tab, but as the tab states, it's advanced options, so most of them you don't need to know about them. Although you can always click help and learn about those.